There it is, recording. And then I'm just going to welcome you on, and we're going to take it from there. All right. Hi, Gwen and Elizabeth.
Hi.
It's really fun to have you here. It's funny because, the listeners don't know at home that we've been just kind of shooting the shit for like 15 minutes because we're getting along. It's just a bunch of lesbians talking, hanging out. That's what we are. That's what we're doing. Lesbian moms whose life are probably just messy, but we are hanging out. We just talked about how our backgrounds on our Zoom screens are a mess. I have paper bag art that my daughter forced me to put up on the wall, and your actually background looks very nice and well put together. Actually,
it's nice of you to say.
I know, that's nice of you to say. There's like an unmade bed in the background, and yeah.
That means it's a well lived in bed, and I think that's important, and I think that matters in the world.
Yeah, totally fair.
All right, so the listeners kind of know Gwen because they have already heard Gwen's story, which was like mind blowing and like beautiful in all the wonderful queer ways that it can possibly be. And now Gwen's partner Elizabeth is here to share a little bit more about their story and their journey. So that's where I'm going to stop because I don't do a great job of summarizing your stories. I think you'll do it way better. So let's get right into that 30-second elevator pitch of who you are.
Are we going together or separately?
I don't know. Are we going together?
Let's go together.
Okay.
Let's just
do it together. Oh boy, this is fun. Okay.
You start.
You do it.
You start.
We have a habit where Gwen tells like stories and like isn't very detailed in her storytelling often. So like when we're out in a setting, Gwen will start with like the overarching key points, and then I'll fill in all the holes. But let's see if we can do that in 30 seconds.
I love this. This is basically how my wife and I do stories too. But then my wife is like, I know I was gonna get to that part, and then we start. So I'm very excited for this.
I'm always like, do you mind? Can I just fill in a couple holes here?
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure you add this part. Yeah, I feel you. I know how it goes. Okay, I got to put this timer up. Let's see how we do. I'll never stop you. You can go as far. You can do the whole interview, and I won't stop you. You can do the whole. Okay, here we go. On your mark. Get set. Go.
Okay. Let's see. Our oldest kid is almost 14. So this is Gwen, started fostering when I was in my 20s. We adopted 3 kids through foster care. My co-parent and I got divorced when my kids were 4, 5, and 7. And then Liz, oh man, we're going to be really over time. Your turn. You go. See, it's hard.
I was like not even sure I was going to have kids for most of my life. I had like a little bit of an intuition that I might be a single mother at some point, in part because I was raised by a single mom. I took a year-long adventure around the world and came home pregnant and decided to have a child. My child's father is Angolan, so he lives abroad, and raised my daughter pretty much with the help of my mother for the first, I guess it was 3 years. So when we met, our kids were 3, 4, 5, and 7. And it was like a quintessential small town gay love story in which we were both on the board of directors at our kids' early childhood center. And during a time of a lot of transition and a lot lot and we
stayed late at a lot of meetings.
As you do.
As you do. Yeah, we created more agenda items to
the 2 of us needed to talk through, and then
that's how that happened.
Yeah. Okay, that was a little over, just a little, but it's fine with me. I don't mind because there's a lot in here, right? So beautiful, amazing. I have a question. There's a lot to unpack and there's a lot for us to talk about. But first I want to ask Elizabeth, how old were you when you had did you say it's your daughter or your son?
My daughter. I was 31.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Not sure you want to have a baby, end up, traveling the world as you do gay style, and not gay style, getting pregnant accidentally.
That's a pretty key part of the story too.
Yeah. So let's talk. It is a key part of the story. Yeah. And I'll just like name right out of the bat. Like Gwen's the first woman. I mean, actually, back up. Gwen's my like longest partnership, period.
Right.
but also not the first woman I've been intimate with, but the first woman I've been in a committed relationship with.
Okay, and we know, Gwen, we know basically how your children came to you, but we'll take a little recap after we unpack Elizabeth's story. And so Elizabeth, okay, so were you living like how did you identify when you went on this world trip?
That's such a good question. How did I identify? I feel like the question of how I identify is actually still has a question mark around it
Okay.
for me.
All right. Let's
In
let's
terms of,
unpack that.
I know. Are you ready? We're just gonna get right into the
I
meat of
love
it.
it. Yes.
God, where do I even start? I guess I'll just say, like, I grew up in Northampton, Massachusetts, as we were joking before the start of the show, deemed lesbian capital of the United States of the
Basically is.
America, and
It's like the lesbian and Birkenstocks capital.
Yeah, totally. And
Barbara
dance goes.
Walters did like a whole show on it. So many dance goes.
Lots of clogs, lots of stocks, and lots of gays.
I'm not gonna lie, I've had many pairs of dance coats and Birkenstocks. Okay, continue.
So I grew up in like a very, I mean, I'll call it queer now, but that's not the language that was being used in the 80s and 90s. It was very like gay and lesbian.
Yes.
And then the bisexuals as the is the third leg of the stool, so to speak. And so it's funny, I never really thought about like my identity in a big way, other than always sort of saying, well, I'm like attracted to men right now, but if the right woman came along, I'd be with a woman, and just always having this like flexibility and always having a lot of different families and sexual preferences around me, which I think is part of why I like did it in some ways, like never sort of felt this urge to put a stake in the ground in any real way, because I was like living in this kind of privileged environment of like, yeah. And so it just like, it took on a bit of a different meaning, claiming that in that way. So yeah, and then like, had a series of like small love affairs with women, but was mostly partnered with men. I'm like still unpacking for myself like why that is the case. There's like a lot to a lot to say around that.
Like what? Like what do you mean?
Oh God. Okay, I'm about to.
Identity is hard. Like this is hard. And now, like to your credit, like now there are so many more terms that we can use that were not there, like you just said, in the 80s and 90s. It was gay, lesbian, and bisexual. And bisexual was not necessarily accepted.
Totally.
Like you had to choose a side, right?
Totally.
And so, explain.
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of ways I understand that for myself, and being like really honest and vulnerable. One of the ways I understand that is like growing up as a very overweight child and adolescent, having a deep yearning to be sort of accepted or idealized through the male gaze, the male gaze being just like what is also just like mass culture, popular culture, the patriarchy, all that is. And so now as I've like reflected on like, wow, what was that, right? The part of me that was like, yeah, like I'm like intimate with women. And like, I would definitely tell you that like the first love of my life was a woman. And yet I was like continuing to pursue partnership with men, kind of with an underlying, like, I need to prove that I can I need to prove I can like be part of mainstream society or be seen as attractive by a man or be accepted. There's been a long like journey with my body and my physical appearance and beauty and all of that, and weight that has been a big part of my story through my teens and 20s, especially.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. 100%. I mean, I dated men a lot too. I think it's kind of similar to you. Like I just continued to date men also because they seemed easier.
Yeah. Totally.
I think Liz would probably agree with you on that.
The first thing
we have to talk about shit all the time. I'm like, not all the time, but like we could talk about stuff.
Let's
I
dig
think-
into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things I said to you. I was like, hey, so like I just want you to know that like I'm really into you. And like I'm a little afraid like we're just gonna be processing a lot. And I'm like, I don't want to do that.
It's the processing. It's the process. We process too much. Oh my God. Yeah. But like I can relate to that. And I think a lot of folks out there can relate to that. And there is a lot to the patriarchy and the need to feel attractive under a man's gaze, even when we have done the work and we are super loud and out and queer. It's still there. It's still a part of society.
Yeah.
It's strong. It's real strong.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And I want to just like say too, just to like give like out of respect for like some of the men I have been partnered with, like I really loved them too.
Same.
And when I look at like, you know, I'm like, oh, there was like some choices I was making too about what I was narrowing in on that came from a real sort of distorted need. And common need.
Right. Yeah. Same. I really loved the guys I dated too. But I really, really liked sex with the women I've dated.
Totally.
There's that.
I mean, that's like, I'm like, let's open that door.
But so, okay. So,
Yeah.
so you went on a trip, you hooked up and got home and realized,
Yeah,
well,
little more involved than that. But I had gone, so after grad school, I bought a one-way ticket to India and had traveled throughout India and Nepal and Africa and met who is my daughter's father. I was in India for a 4-month stint, met him the last like 3 days, had like a brief love affair, left him thinking that was a love affair, like whatever, I'm never going to see that guy again. And then we ended up being in communication and I went to Africa and spent 2 months with him and his family and he came to the States. And so I'd say it was probably like 8 months into this weird whirlwind of a love affair that I was standing in my parents' kitchen here in Northampton. I had an apartment in San Francisco that I had sublet. I had a car parked on a farm. It's where you're from? That's amazing. And realized I was pregnant. And it was like a bit of a moment where I was like, okay, like I just got these master's degrees. I've been traveling for a year. I have like a house. Like, what am I going to do with my life? And like, what do I want to do?
Right. Yeah.
With this baby. And my mom, who's like some form of a saintly figure, was like, hey, seems like, you know, you aren't sure if this is your long-term relationship and like you really want to have this baby. And if you do, like move back here and like I'll help you. And so that is what I did.
Wow. So you decided to keep the baby and what was our conversation with the father about it and how did that go down?
Yeah, and he was elated. He has 2 other daughters who are older than our daughter together. But you know, we'd also like had our first major conflict, like all the sort of signs were there that like it was not necessarily going to be a relationship with a lot of longevity. So he left my whole pregnancy. He came back for her birth. He stuck around for, I'd say about like 4 months and then left again. And then it's just me and her and my mom and my stepdad and my dad and his wife are here. And, you know, I was kind of back in my hometown as a parent, which was like a pretty wild.
That's a wild ride. You go like, you're like, okay, so you said did you get a master? You had master's degrees?
Yeah.
So and then you go on this like you're living a completely different life.
She's on like her eat, pray, love journey.
I was like on my Elizabeth Gilbert journey. Totally. I've probably gone on like 10 Elizabeth Gilbert journeys. Just like
so you were like living that Elizabeth Gilbert eat, pray, love life, and you were gonna live your passion. You were gonna live your right. And then you come back and you have these degrees, like sky's the limit. You're gonna start and then oh no, I'm gonna have a baby and I'm gonna settle down and I'm gonna live at home.
Yeah.
That is a big, huge freaking change.
It's a huge fucking freaking change. But one thing I will say is that you know, there's a part of me that's like very like experience oriented. I've traveled a lot. I'm always learning. I'm always digesting. I'm always like thinking about what's next and what I can build, do, create. I will say that actually like pregnancy was like the most inner peace I've ever felt in my life. I was like,
Really?
oh, if I did like nothing else in my life, carrying a child in my body and eventually birthing them is like a pretty, like I can feel good about this.
Okay.
So it was a strange, very unexpected kind of like, I call it almost like a soothing of my like existential anxiety of like, what do I need to do,
Right.
become, create? Everything just became very present moment for me.
Wow, that's beautiful. I have to say, I didn't have that experience with my pregnancy,
Most people don't.
but I thought I would. I really thought I would. So there's that.
It was
But
unexpected. I thought I was gonna be like, oh God, how am I gonna do this? You know?
yeah, you froze for a second on me. Can you just say that it was really unexpected? What did you just say right after that? I missed it.
I was like, how am I gonna, like, it was unexpected for me to find peace in sort of settling down, settling in, being so, you know, being pregnant, being in my body in that way.
Especially because you said you never were sure that you were going to have a kid, right? Or
Totally.
that you wanted a kid.
Totally.
So, okay. Wow. All right. So, but okay. So now let's talk about you're settled down with your baby and your family. What, and like you're kind of identifying this way or that way. What happens? Where do you go from there? Like, I know where it's going to end up, but like,
Yeah.
how do we get there?
Yeah. um, so funny. I'm just thinking about first meeting you, and I'm thinking about like first seeing you. And I had like dated some, like, in my daughter's name is Isis. I had dated some when she was very young. And then it's funny, and we like ended up on the board together. I was dating someone at the time. Gwen was still in her marriage. And I just remember having that feeling of like, oh no, like, and I think both of us have talked about this since both of us were a little bit like, oh no, we can't talk to that person. Like I was like, I can't talk to that person that
Because there
because
was
like
a
there's
spark.
some sort of attraction I can feel in me, and like that person's married and I'm currently dating someone, and like that's off limits. So I'd say for the first year we actually didn't, we like barely even looked at each other.
Yeah.
But Gwen, did you feel the spark too?
Yeah, I was definitely, and I like in retrospect, like there was when they invited you onto the board, I was like, I don't know if you should really do that. I mean, I don't know that that's a great idea. And then I was like, why are you saying that? Like you like, and then I was like, because she's kind of hot and like you're kind of like
And you
into
can't.
her.
You're not allowed to stray.
Yeah.
You're
No, I was like,
married.
Totally.
yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Okay. And you
And
had
very
kids.
married. Like I was
Yeah.
very married.
Yes, I
Very
am too. I
married
get
and
it.
like in a small community. Like Gwen and her ex were, I would say, like a very idealized version of family for a lot of people. And I think like there's probably a lot of listeners out there who can either relate themselves or have like seen couples like this who almost get like pedestaled within the community as like the ideal of like, yeah, I mean, you guys you were very collaborative, you know,
Right.
you had
Right.
like
We were
fostered
like
a bunch
super involved. We had at one point like 5 kids in the daycare. Like it was like a thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in case there's a listener who didn't already listen, and if you haven't listened to Gwen's episode, go find it and listen because it's really a bomb. It's a bomb episode. But Gwen, give us a rundown of like how your kids came to you, and so we have a good clear picture of who you are in society right now.
Sure. So I was like I desired to be a parent from a really young age. I started fostering when I was like 24 or something really young. And so adopted one kid through foster care, who's now almost 14. And then with my then wife, and then fostered a bunch and was like, oh, maybe we're gonna have our own biological kids. Like, let's adopt one more. Figured we wait a long time, didn't wait a long time, got my son, who's now almost 11, or 11 rather.
Wait, your son came through fostering, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Came home at 2 days old.
Mm-hmm.
And then like 3 months in, they were like, so bun in the oven, do you want his brother, who now identifies as non-binary, but so his sibling. And we said, sure. And in the interim, my oldest, so those two are biologically related. My oldest has now 3 younger biological siblings, all of whom I fostered at one point or another.
Oh
So it's like too much to keep track of. I don't know. No,
but
you go ahead.
that's I see why especially in your little lesbian community, like Northampton, not that not everybody is a lesbian, but like you, I can see how you'd be put on a pedestal. Like you have parented so many children and y'all are like, you were like co-parenting so well, for all intents and purposes, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you were like a poster couple for how queer folks do it right.
Totally. 100%.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to just add to Gwen's story that even before Gwen fostered, Gwen had a babysitting business in high school and was like watching every single kid in the community,
especially
and had like
kids of queer parents,
and had like a wait list basically. So like that goes back
did.
like so far for her.
Wow, that is a piece of the story that I was missing from the last episode. So thank you for that. That's amazing. Were you like a huge Babysitters Club reader? Did you read all the books? Because I did.
Sure, I sure did. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Me too.
Oh my gosh.
Me too. Have you watched the new show?
I haven't, but the kids are.
Yeah.
I feel like I should sit in.
The kids, I mean, I've seen parts of it, but they brought gay in. So they changed it up a little. Like one of the girl, Dawn, has 2 dads.
Yep.
Can't believe I know their names, but I do.
That's okay.
Mal,
Stacy, Mal. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I just went back to, what was it? My Two Dads, that other show.
Oh,
from
yeah.
Are You?
Oh yeah. Well, there's another one. Those men should have been gay. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I know. That was weird.
Kate and Allie, My Two Dads.
I feel like I always thought they were.
Even Full House. I was like, there's something else going on there.
Yeah, right.
That's a lot of men in there.
So much homophobia in the 90s. Come on. Come on. All right. So, okay. So you come on the board. There's a spark, but you're trying not to look at each other.
Yeah.
How does that work?
It worked okay for the first year. And then they asked me if I wanted to be on the executive committee of the board. And I'm going to be like so fucking honest that I was like, oh, that sounds like an interesting work. And oh, Gwen's on the executive committee. Yeah, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah. Like once that fire hits, it's really hard to stay away, right?
It was like a real,
I feel like I'm like, I didn't cheat. Like I want you to, I just want to say that like,
it's like important to,
that like we like that all coincided with me getting divorced and like all of that. Like, so yes. So that all happened before anything happened between the two of us, or even the spark of anything happened between the two of us.
Right.
And I was also doing this internal game with myself as someone who had been partnered with man after man after man of like, oh, whatever. It's just an innocent little benign little crushy thing.
Yeah. Okay. But then the first time we ever kissed, you were like, am I going to like live in a house with 4 kids? And I was like, whoa, you're like the straightest U-hauler I've ever met in my whole, like, what is going on? I was like, that's even a lot for me.
The straightest U-hauler. Well, I think the lesson here is she wasn't straight. She wasn't a straight U-hauler.
Turns out
she checked a lot of boxes. Okay, it's
funny.
She said that in her dance goes.
Yeah. People are like, do you have a coming out story? And I'm like, you mean when I told my friends I was with Gwen? And they were like, oh yeah, that's not surprising. Whatever. Anyways, like
right. Yeah. So okay, so shit's hitting the fan in Gwen's life. Elizabeth is coming on as, I think you said, executive something or other.
It's like small words,
they go through one ear and out the other, but yes, doing something big on the board. And so I will never do anything big on any board, so like but okay, and so what happens? There's 4 kids.
I was
and then
like,
you have one
parenting with my ex, so like where we like both went in and out of the house, but the kids stayed for like 6 horrible months. Wow. And I mean, it's really great maybe for them. For my kids, I don't know how great it was, but it was anyway. During that period of time, I had like sorry, go ahead. I
was gonna say, so it's like you do it in the interest of the kids, like to keep their lives as normal as possible and not change things for them. Okay, yeah, interesting. And I can see how we would think that's the best thing, and I can see how possibly it's not. So
it got complicated. I mean, I think anytime you're like in a situation where you're like, I guess I'll just say we parented really differently. And so for our kids, I think it ultimately was like a relief to them when they could move between 2 houses and be like, this is what my life is like in that house. And this is what my not like on Tuesday, I was totally allowed to do this on Thursday. Why is that? You know what I mean? Like it was just totally complicated.
Right.
But I had this like little spot that I would stay. Like I had some friends who are much older, and they have a little place down in Florida. And so I would like stay at their little house on my non-kid days.
Nice.
Which was like this very simple but very beautiful little apartment on the second floor, like nestled into the trees. So we called it the tree house. And I think both of us look back very fondly on the days of the tree house.
So it's like so peppermint patty is what that is.
Yeah.
So okay. So you're doing the nesting and the co-parenting, and Elizabeth's on the board, and then what happens? How'd you slip into them DMs?
Well,
we didn't have DMs, but
yeah, we were like connecting. I mean, I also was like, oh, this person seems like they're like going through. This sounds
She
so
looks like a shit show. Let me go sleep with her.
Perfect. Yeah. Honestly, though, from like a real place of like a real
like a sympathy situation. I got it. I just didn't know that was our humble beginning.
Like, you really need me right now. Gwen was like simultaneously going through a divorce with 3 kids and had like just fucking defended and gotten her PhD. Right. And I just remember having this moment where I was like, wow, this human's like doing a lot of different things right now. You know, it's like best and worst of times. And like I could just feel that. And so there was just I think I was like putting forward little gestures. Like, I was like, hey, I like brought you a beer. Like, hey, it was cute. And it was coming from like a, whatever. I'm not going to say I'm void of like clear like ulterior motives, but like when I reflect on that, I'm like, oh, I was like really, my heart felt very like inclined to like care for you
because you had like a lesbian crush, and
and then I was like, how was your day? And she was like, oh my God, you're the nicest person I've ever met.
I was like, no man has ever asked me how my day was.
Yeah, it's a lesbian crush, and they are intense, and you really do want what's best for the person you're crushing on. Like, yeah. So there's a lot of compassion that goes into these lesbian crushes, right?
And I think it's, it is true. I think, and you were kind of going through like a rocky post-dating situation with somebody. And I think like there is something about like having met at a time when like I had no game. Like I was so like, I was like kind of unraveled. Like there's like, this is what I am at my core.
You were in the trenches, yo. Yeah. You had 4 kids and you were going through a divorce. You were in the trenches. There's no time to breathe.
Yeah.
There was like a really honest quality to it though. I'm like acknowledging that like that could be perceived or could play out in another way, right? In which you're like, I'm going through a hard time. Let me do anything to distract myself. And like both of us were going through our own kinds of hard times that were like pretty intense. And also showing up in this, like, I don't even think we were like talking about, we were just like connecting about other things. Do you know what I mean? And it was like this really sweet and like tender and like little sacred treehouse peppermint patty time for
but with gay, as you do. Yeah, but with gay. So when did you take your relationship to the next level, and then how'd that pan out? Because there's a lot of kids involved.
Yeah, so it's funny, like, so 2 things I'm thinking. One is I think we did sort of like, there are things that we kept separate, and I don't know if this is true of everybody who gets together with someone like later in life or after a long relationship or something, but there is this way in which, like, different from my 20-year-old self, like, I'm like, we both had our own lives, like full, complete lives. And like, we had places to go process shit that we didn't want to talk to with each other, or like that didn't feel like it didn't need to take up space between us. And I think that actually really remains true for us both. And it's like, and I think it's one of the ways that we like, I mean, we could talk about this too, but like, I think that our relationship has evolved in a different, like, yes, we have a blended family. Yes, we at times like parent one another's kids, but we also have like a lot of distance between us in certain ways, or independence, I would say. And so, we waited a while. Like, I think I met Isis before, started hanging out a little bit more around Isis, but we waited a few, like, I don't know, 6 months or something like that before we started hanging out with each other's kids. And then
the kids didn't fully know what was, they were so young at that point too. The eldest was 7,
right, so
they were little. I don't think that wasn't fully on their radar that like we would all be spending time together even in those early times, because like there was something romantic happening between us. In fact, they still tell that story. Gwen recently had like a sex talk with the kids in the minivan, and they were they basically were like, said to Gwen, they're like, you have sex? With who?
No, stop. Really? Oh,
I was like, well, Liz. And they were like, Okay, can we just talk about something else?
I was like, wow, there's a lot we take for granted. Our kids understand that they just like totally not.
They thought you were just like Kate, like literally Kate and Allie.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. There were some special early moments of them.
Yeah.
No way.
Wow. Okay. All right. So Birds and the Bees talk, that's a whole other thing that I just did an episode with somebody and
It's a
their
lot.
daughter, and they talked about the Birds and the Bees talk that happened, and that, whoa, that's a whole,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
ready for that. But anyway, okay, I digress.
So we dated, you know, and like the kids knew we were dating, and that was like a long time, like a couple years.
Yeah.
Where Liz
Oh,
was
wow.
living in like on the third, Liz and Isis were sharing a house with her mom and stepdad, and you know, I like my ex moved out and whatever, we had our little half-time schedule, and then
Yeah.
I moved into a new house, and
Gwen spent about 2 years living in the house that she and her ex had lived in, and so we had this like kind of interesting swapping of time, because Gwen had her kids half time. My mom and my daughter are like thick as thieves, and so they spent a ton of time together. So we got like kind of an unusual amount of like solo time and bonding time, which
Amazing.
it's really amazing. In fact, I'm like, it's kind of wild this way that we like have children with the people that we like fall in love with, and then we end up being like, where's our relationship, because now all we're doing is parenting together. And there was this like, you know, different element to what was available to us because we came together, you know, already having our kind of family structures intact with other people. So yeah, and it was a lot of the kids like figuring out, I don't know, so when I think about those like early years of them connecting and then where they are now, it's like, it's kind of amazing. I mean, so my daughter Isis and Gwen's youngest, Jonah, I mean, for the first like year, maybe they were like at each other.
They like bickered
They
constantly.
bickered.
Oh,
there was a
God.
little bit of this, like, who's going to hold the position of the youngest one?
Right.
And like everyone looking to the 7-year-old for all of, you know, everyone wanting to be in her good graces all the time. And then it's just like shifted. I mean, it's shifted in a lot of different ways over time, but I would say like specifically with Isis and Jonah, like those two are so close now. I mean, they share a bedroom.
They're like a year apart, or they're
a year apart. So close.
So close. They're like
cool.
this really adorable old married couple, like in this funny way where like I'm like, I don't want to talk to you guys together because you bore the shit out of me, but you are so invested. Like they could be like, oh my gosh, and then look at this, and then I will look at it, and then tell me that really long boring story, and I'd love to hear every word, and I'll even ask a follow-up question. And I'm like, wow, cool that you've each met your match there.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I'll pause the movie for you. Go get us a snack. Like it's just like really, I don't know.
Yeah.
They crack me up.
Yeah. They're like your 80-year-old grandparents.
Totally.
They actually really like totally.
They're gonna be like on rocking chairs on a porch together, like until the day they die, you know, just like shooting the shit about the weather. Like,
that's amazing. And that's best. I mean, that's the best you could hope for, right?
In general, I will say like the four of them get along really beautifully.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when I reflect on that, I'm like, I'm sure that's a function of age too. 3, 4, 5, and 7. Everyone's still like a little bit more malleable and like, you know, and a function of who they are. And I honestly think that like there's so many expanded versions of what family looks like in our house, like between conversations, like we have a lot of conversations about like the difference between your biological parent and who's parenting you. And, you know, we have all these different configurations. I mean, Jonah and Michael are biological siblings. As Gwen shared, Matea, the oldest, has 3 other siblings who Gwen has like fostered at some point and who she sometimes sees. They're now adopted by another woman who was living close by for a long time. Isis has these 2 sisters in Africa that she's never met.
Right.
And a dad she FaceTimes with sometimes. Like everybody's, there's this real kind of expanded, malleable sense of what family means.
I love that. That's new traditional family right there. That's like, that is the epitome of why we needed this podcast, because of families like this that break the mold and also show the world that it works.
Totally.
It's fucking beautiful, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
I mean, it doesn't always work,
like, no, I feel like there's this other piece that I like noticed, like, I mean, just because of the schedule too, there are all these different like combinations of people that end up together. And I feel like every combination that there is like is thriving in its own way. You know, like the four, like especially during the pandemic, the four of the kids were just like, we're like, I don't know, man, like, can you guys all just go play together? Like, and they were like, yeah, totally, we got this. And like even still for long periods of time. And I feel like then there's this other dynamic between like Liz and Isis and I, which has been more complicated in certain ways, but I think like has hit a different place. Like, I don't know, I tend to do a lot with the four of them just because like that's kind of my jam.
Because Gwen's the one that was like, I want an army, and I was the one that was like, I don't know.
I'm like, gonna be a single mom the rest of my life. And then Gwen's like, well, listen, I have my whole compilation of the Babysitters Club books.
We're
Take
gonna read
some
them
notes.
Totally.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And also you also have Gwen, you have an ex who is around as well. So that's a whole other dynamic, I'm sure.
That's a whole other dynamic. And it's been, I mean, I'm trying to think about how to talk about this in public.
We don't have to talk about it.
No, I mean, I'll just say it's been complicated. And I think like Liz has been like really, I think again, this is like one of those places where I feel like we have like like there are places within our dynamic where we have relative independence. And I feel like for the most part, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like Liz has had really good boundaries around like, that is not, she's not my ex. Like, like here's what we're going to be able to control and here's what's going to happen here. And I've like dealt with that in the ways that I've needed to. And my kids have like negotiated the two homes. At this point, they're at a place where it feels relatively positive, but yeah, that's like a whole other layer. That's like not been without complication.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about yesterday as we were just sort of like thinking about today's like the discussion we're having right now. I was thinking about, which I think about a lot, is like what we're modeled. Like my parents divorced when I was 2. I was an only child. My mom she had a couple boyfriends early on, but then didn't repartner again until I was like 16, 17. Oh, wow. So essentially it was just her and I for a lot of years. And then my dad, he had one partner who he was with for almost 15 years from the time I was like 10 to 25. So my most like formative years. And that was the model that was very much her approach. She was like, I'm not here to like, I'm just going to like treat your mom with respect. She's your mom. And like, know that like, there are things your parents have say over that like, I don't have say over as this like other adult in the space. And so it's always kind of this interesting thing of like, you know, the sort of frame that we often use is like, where are we together? Where are we apart? Like, what are the things that we have like fully shared ownership over? And then what are the things we don't? And like, how do we navigate that?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's really working out for y'all.
Most of the time it does. I feel like we have our moments, you know, like I think sometimes I'm like, oh, I thought we were together there, or like, oh, I thought we worked together there, and you know, or vice versa. Like we both have that, like,
or I'm like, you didn't consult me. I didn't know that Jonah was doing gymnastics again on Wednesday. Well, that like totally messes up this whole other plan I made around, you know, there's like parenting. The logisticizing is ridiculous sometimes.
It's so ridiculous. And I only have 2 kids. You have 4.
Yeah. That part is complicated.
Yeah. And also, Gwen, your family story, the model you got was, you know, an interesting one, but is helpful to the situation you're in now as well, right?
Totally. It was funny, like Michael, we recently had this meeting at school, like my ex and I actually, for my son Michael, and they were like, so when Michael's at Gwen's house, like, who does he live with? And like, what does he call the people he lives with? And I was like, shit, like this could be like a bomb that I could set off. But I was like thinking about it, I was like, I don't think he like he just calls Liz. Like he's not like, oh, you know, but then later I like thought about it and I was like, hey, like they asked me like how you would define your relationships with Liz and Isis. And I said, I think that you feel like Isis is a sister. I said, but I didn't know what to say about Liz. And he was like, oh, I refer to her as my stepmom. And I was like, oh, and we were both like, oh my God, that's so cute. Like we had no idea that that's how you think about it, because that's like not language we've ever used, but it's funny to watch them. And I can certainly like relate from my own experience, like try to figure out how to fit the adults in their lives into these like labels that other people understand.
Right. From your own experience, right? Exactly. Because your other mother turned into your godmother, even though you were raised Jewish, and like, you know, like totally. a whole other thing. So all right. So you blended it all together. It seems like it's going swimmingly. let's pivot a little bit, because we did talk about talking about parenting through neurodiversity, and how that shows up, and that's something that I would love to dig into more. And I haven't had enough conversations about that. And there's a lot of neurodiversity out there in the world, and there are a lot of parents who are raising children with neurodiversity. So let's dig into that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, like as a place to, I mean, I feel like the other piece that's relevant for our kids is that, so two of them are white and two of them are biracial or multiracial. And so there's that piece too, that factors into their identities and, like all of the things that means for them in the world.
Well, yeah, you're two white parents
Yep.
raising children. So that's all, there's some intersectionality there, and a lot goes into that too. So I don't know, dig into kind of what you would want to discuss about it, because y'all know more about it than I do.
I'll kick us off. I think just like speaking to the neurodiversity part, it's like important to name that this is Gwen's like professional and academic wheelhouse.
Right.
So so I'm in like a constant state of learning around like how to put language to things, how to have patience, quite honestly, when I'm like having an expectation that like doesn't match the processing speed or like, what's possible in the moment.
I could use help in that matter.
Totally.
I mean, my daughter has ADHD, and I definitely am not doing the best job with it. I'll be
hard.
Straight up front.
Well, it's hard to know what to do, because I don't think we're like, and again, we live in a world that caters towards like a certain kind of functioning, a certain kind of mind, you know what I mean?
Right.
So like, it's, I think most of us are like at a deficit of like tools or understanding or empathy. So I guess it's been like a lot of learning for me. I mean, it's been a lot of learning for me around parenting, I think, in general. Like, I would say that like I'm probably more of a, like, I'm like, oh, I can't wait for you all to become teenagers and want to like talk through those deep existential things and all your like weird social choices.
You had a dream last night that we were all partying together.
Yeah, I had a dream we were all partying together last night, and I was like, oh, finally we're all dancing. We're staying up till 5 a.m. Like,
whoa. I am so scared of the teenage years. Right. Okay.
I mean, I'm scared too, but I feel like there's a part of me that like, I mean, I do leadership development work. Like, I work with adults often. Gwen works entirely with kids. So like, there's a lot of learning I've done in her presence of like how to, and you'll find us in the kitchen often. I'll be like trying to explain something to one of the kids, and I'll just like give up and look at Gwen and be like, can you translate into kid language? Because I like have no idea how to say this in a simple way.
A lot of that goes on in my house too, but it's like vice versa between the two of us.
Yeah. And like, we have 4 kids who all present in different ways and like all have sort of different superpowers and different areas of challenge and like different personalities. And it is kind of wild, I think, in general for me. I think Gwen has more experience having been in a classroom or like any place where there's like a lot of different types of kids. It's hard for me to realize, I'm like, oh, you all kind of need something a little bit different. And so it requires me as a parent to be constantly, or as the adult in the room, to be constantly shifting.
Well, also because Liz, you came to this home with one child that you kind of, I'm assuming you knew and knew how to parent, and we all have our challenges with our kids, but you came with one child, and now you're in with 3 other children who have all of their needs, and you're not used to dealing with multiple
100%.
children's needs, right?
100%. And like, am an only child myself. Like I said, like I grew up in a very small kind of family system. So that is very real in terms of just like, yeah, I mean, we talk about that a lot of just like, I think Gwen is like more like collectively attuned, honestly, in some ways. And I'm a little bit more like, whoa, it gets really overwhelming really fast. And like, how do we navigate that?
Yeah.
So Gwen, how do you navigate that?
Well, one of the things I was going to say as you were talking, I think it's part of like philosophically where I come from in terms of talking, like, and I think it's, I don't know, just this idea that like everybody is different, everybody does need something different, and I think the kids know that. Like, they're like, oh, here's so and so goes again on their bullshit. Like, I know how mommy's going to respond to that. You know what I mean? And like, And like they do, like I think there is like a level of consistency, even though it doesn't look the same. And when they were younger or at like different times, so not like I feel like kids have said any of them have said like there's a disparity, or I mean they don't use that language, so they're like you're not being fair, like whatever.
Right.
And I feel like I've been able to walk it back and be like, listen, like you don't need that, like you need something different. Like this is what losing it looks like for you,
Right.
and this is what like your morning routine needs to be, because here are these 3 reasons I've thought about it. Like, do you want to collaborate? But like it doesn't have to be the same for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that has also, and even just like I think about like my 3 have like always grown up with like having other kids in and out of the house too. So there is this understanding of like, oh, like you just don't know who anybody is or what they're gonna get, like what you're gonna get when a kid.
And like everybody could be waiting in the car and one person's inside melting down, and okay, we all wait in the car until that one person's done melting down. That's like such a different. I think that's like what happens with a lot of kids. That doesn't, happen with.
Right. Well, like I'm just thinking about my situation, and like, one kid melts down more than the other, and I have to parent differently with that one kid than I do with the other one. And then there's, well, you never do this for this one, and you don't do that to this one, and it's always me. And then I don't handle my response to that as well as I think, Gwen, you do.
This is like I mean, we all just know that like few of us will like, I feel like you have a very like being steeped in like the strategies and language and experience with kids. I sort of am like, I'm like, you set a very high bar.
That's great.
Well, and
I'm cutting out the rest of us some slack.
What I think is cool too, though, like I feel like I watch the kids like do similar things for each other.
Yeah.
Like I feel like now that they're like, oh, you're gonna need help doing this particular part of the things, or like I will often like be like, hey, can you're really good at this, can you help so and so with that? They really struggle, like like even the kid in our house who's probably like the least organized and has the hardest time getting from here to there without getting distracted. I'm like, you know what you're really good at? You're really good at doing the laundry. Like you love the way the machine works. You're really good at making sure everything gets in there. Like you just take that right on. Like that is your contribution. And I think that there are ways like things like that have
that's exactly what I tell my wife.
Yeah.
But it's for a completely different motive.
Totally.
But there is,
I know. I'm like, you're really good at shoveling. You're so good at shoveling. You make such clean lines.
But I feel like too, like when you have as many kids as we do, it's like it really is like a team. Like you have like we wouldn't be able to do shit if like we didn't involve them in taking care of like stuff around here or helping one another or like any of that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's illuminated for me too, where it gets easier with more. I mean, there are ways, right, in which it's like obviously more chaotic or more challenging logistically, but there is ways in which parenting is easier because it's like, everybody's watching a movie and you're like, time to go, everyone brush your teeth. All you need is like one kid to get up and start the movement, and everybody's like, okay, I guess so.
Wow, not in my house.
And I say that because like I have moments where it's just like I feel like it's Isis is the only one being parented, right? And her and I particularly like can get into major power struggles, right? So it's like then we're just like locked in, we're like dueling it out, you know what I mean? I'm like, no.
Like Liz is like, Gwen, go tell her to do it. And I'm like, hey, can you? She's like, okay,
yeah. Well, and that's what happens, right? And I think similarly too, like with Gwen's kids, there's ways in which like, they'll be having a melt. Gwen absolutely can't talk to the kids, like a screaming match. And then I'll go upstairs and they'll be so soft with me just because like the dynamic in the relationship is just like inherently different. And I think it's interesting to me. It doesn't have that same charge of like, you're my parent and your job is to push the boundary and my job's to push back against it. There's a little bit more of like, oh, you're my ally and like, you're my friend in this moment. And it's cool to watch how that can play out.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of, I was just trying to think more specific.
We're so chatty, by the way.
I'm sorry.
I love it. So listen, it makes my job easy.
Remember that whole 30-second thing at the beginning?
No, I love it. Keep
30
going.
second the end here. No, I think like 2 things that come to mind around like the neurodiversity piece, because I think they're big. One is like, and I think routines are really important. I think consistency is really important. And somebody said something to me, like one of the first foster placements I ever had was a kid who was identified as having reactive attachment disorder, which basically means a lot of really intense and complicated behavior. And this woman I was working with was like, listen, at the end of the day, you're going to be exhausted because like you figured out how to prevent every single meltdown, or you didn't, like you were just playing catch up with yourself. And I think that like for some reason, you know, like different stupid things land at different times, but like that to me, I think about a lot where I'm like, oh, like tomorrow Gwen is going to be really happy if today Gwen implements like these strategies with my kids.
Oh, or tonight after they're once they're finally asleep, Gwen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the moment. That is always the moment when the guilt sets in for the way that I behaved with one of their meltdowns or the impatience I showed.
Yeah.
That's when it hits, and it hits hard and it hurts.
Yeah.
Right.
There's been a lot of nights where I feel like one of us has walked into the bedroom and been like, am I a horrible parent? And the other one's like, no, honey, it's really hard and you're doing a good job.
That's also a really important aspect of like teamwork as a partnership in parenting as lovers. Like there are so many times when that's exact thing. My wife will come in from putting my daughter down and give me a look and I'm like, I know. It's hard. It's really hard. I know, you know, like that affirmation of, I know that sucked. It was really hard. I feel you. She doesn't make it easy. I know, you know, but being that united front that is, that has each other's back. It's important. Yeah. Even though sometimes you don't agree with the way they handle things. And sometimes you have to discuss that, but, yeah.
And that part's really interesting, I think, between us, because on the one hand, I mean, like, I think, on like, that's like another place where we're like, where are we together and where are we apart on this? Like, is this just like, you're going to parent like that? And I'm just going to be like, okay, cool. Or like, are we going to have a conversation about it? Or
because your step parents coming in to each other's individual children.
And like, we don't, I mean, on a pure functional communication basis, we don't always, and I think the kids, I feel like our kids don't often try to like, they don't try and like split and divide us very often, but like, of course they're kids, like they do that sometimes and like they should, it's like a natural testing of boundaries. But like, we have plenty of times where I'm like, sure, you can blah, blah, blah. Or no, you can't blah, blah, blah. And like Gwen has told them the exact opposite. And then they're just like, and then we just look like such idiots.
We need to discuss this.
We're like, so we'll be back. We're going to go talk.
Right. But the fact is that you're working to co-parent, you know what I mean? And like, I guess I'm trying to formulate my question, but like the difference between LGBTQ families and non-queer families, when it comes to splitting parenting duties, like, I mean, there is clearly, you know, a stereotypical quote unquote dad role, right? That still very much plays out in non-queer relationships, and I think it does play out in queer relationships as well. There are a lot of queer folks who take on very heteronormative roles when it comes to parenting, but there are a lot of us who don't, and who split things 50-50. And I guess you two coming into this with a blended family, like, how do you work out? It sounds to me like, Gwen, you and your ex really split things 50-50, and well, maybe not as much. I don't know. Gwen's
I was like 60-40, you know.
60-40, right. More it's so.
Also, I don't know. It's reminding me, just thinking about, it's also a question, I think, of like what you split, right? So I'm like, there's like the very pragmatic things of what it is to parent, you know, doing all the many forms that need to be filled out and things to, you know, and then there's like the emotional piece of like, who's going to be the one to be really present with that kid when they're having a hard time and like take themselves away from the other thing they wanted to do, or I don't know. I just think there's a lot of ways, and it's been challenging, I think, for us, because we have this like 3-to-1 ratio in this certain way. And back to that piece of like, two pieces. One, Gwen having like a lot of like capabilities and natural inclinations to like wrangle a bunch of kids and be the really fun one who like does all the things. And me being more of a person who's like, so I need like lots of alone time. I've had a busy week. I'd like to go journal and drink some tea now, and then I'll be ready to parent, you know, I mean, and that's just true about us as people, right? So like, we're navigating that. We're navigating the fact that like, in a financial sense, like 3 very much belong to Gwen, 1 belongs to me, you know, and like that creates many different sort of complicated scenarios at different
Yeah, I never
points.
thought about the money aspect of blending your family.
It's interesting. I mean, that, you know,
Yeah.
and I think like that stuff comes up, for example, when we're on vacation. Do you know what I mean? And we're like, cool. So we plotted out all these things. Like how are we splitting this up? Like how are we doing this? So yeah, there's a lot of ways, I think, like, you know, beyond the piece of like, I agree. I think like in a lot of hetero relationships, things become very quickly divided along gender lines. And like, there's not a lot of conversation around that. And it does look really different in queer families. And I would say like in a blended family, there's all these other layers of like,
a lot of layers.
Yeah.
Navigating all these different layers.
Yeah. And it feels like queer in this sense of like, again, just like how we're deciding to be together and also independent is also, it feels like we're like, yes, we're blended, but again, like there's this piece where I'm like, we're not just like, cool, let's like lump everybody in and we'll all make all of our, suddenly we're going to start making all of our choices together.
Not the
and
Brady Bunch.
Yeah. And like in many ways, functionally it is like for the kids, I don't think they have any experience of like things feeling super separate, you know, but I think like there are ways in which Liz and I have like made some intentional choices to be like, I'm not going to take that first. And like I'll help you, I'll support you if you like want to think it through, but like I don't feel like I need to own that. I feel like you got it. Or like I can take this part on, you know, and kind of like sharing responsibility in certain ways.
So it sounds like there is
a
amount of processing.
This is just it for the month, I think.
That's my quota. We're meeting it right now.
About done.
No, this is like a really, like, equity is a really alive conversation for us at the moment. I mean, I think it always is alive in some way, but at the moment it's been alive too. And you know, it's been an interesting, like, the house we're in now. Gwen was like going through like a series of hard life events and was like, I feel like it's time to get a new house. And I was like, wow, really odd choice. Like now there's like so much other stuff going on. And it was like an intuition almost. This like house we're in now kind of like appeared, and it happened right before the pandemic.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Gwen would tell you that I moved in laundry baskets. Like at first I was like, okay, well, we'll still like live separate, you know.
Like
and then it was like laundry basket after, opposite of the U-Haul.
I'm just gonna bring a few things over. And at one point, my cousin was here, and like Liz had brought like 4 more laundry baskets, and she was like, "When I think she like lives here now." Like when was the last time she stayed at her house?
I was like, maybe we should put some of my artwork up on the walls. They're looking a little bare. Yeah.
There you go. And then it happened, right? But it sounds like y'all are doing a terrific job, and it sounds also extremely complicated.
Yeah, I think both are true. It's like easy, and it's easier. I think it's so funny. You tell people you have 4 kids, they're like, oh my God, you know, and I'm like,
literally.
Actually, I'm not convinced that like I think we have a significantly easier thing going on. You know, I mean, whatever. There's so many factors that go into what makes something easy or complicated. But
I think a big part of that is like, and maybe it's a function of like knowing that there's like, I mean, we have 3 kids with ADHD. Like you have to set your house up for kids to thrive. And I think like what is true is that like that has served everybody, even though they all look really different in terms of the presentation or their identities. Like they all know like it's fine to like lose your shit, and like someone's going to take care of you. And they also all know like, no, but really we have expectations and like we're going to support you in meeting those. And I feel like some of that actually mitigates a lot of what, I mean, like it can get loud and chaotic, but at any point, if you're like, hey, you all have a friend over, that's a lot of kids. Like, let's pipe down. Okay, chachis. They're like, okay, fair. I know. We'll take this outside.
Yeah. Interesting. It's really interesting. And my daughter who has ADHD, I feel like she's very she's aware. She's very self-aware because she kind of has to be, because she's gone through a good amount of emotional things in her 9 years on this earth. And so she is self-aware, and she knows when she's loud, and she knows when she's going to lose it. She doesn't know how to stop it, but she knows it's going to happen. And you know, and then she's always very remorseful, and it's hard. It's so
tender. I feel like I know exactly like what you just described happens here often, and it's like, it's so tender, and it's so beautiful. It's so amazing. It blows my mind actually, like how much self-awareness. I think, you know, particularly like we have one who really like, it's almost like it's like clockwork, like every morning, like and the same, like by the time, you know, breakfast has been had and like it's like 7:30, the amount of remorse and the like, I'm really sorry.
I
And it's like
know.
so
Yeah.
tender
Heartbreaking. Yeah.
and so sweet. And I'm like, wow,
Mhm.
that's skills that most adults don't even have. Like,
Truth. 100%.
good on you.
100%.
You are winning right now.
Good on you for seeing it and
Yeah.
acknowledging it and apologizing for any harm you've caused and also seeking love
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally.
because that's when they need it the most after
Mhm.
a big episode like that. It's exhausting. I mean, it's exhausting for everybody involved, but
Yeah.
you know, so I think there's a lot of self-awareness that comes with these neurodiversities because
Totally.
they have to come with them, right?
Totally.
And then like my son, who knows, the verdict's out on if he's got anything at this point because he's 5. But like when it starts to ramp up, he knows. He like to your point, Gwen, with the kids know, oh, this one's having the thing. You know, I see his face kind of just like, oh, I'm gonna just go mind my business for a second and let, you know what I mean? Like he's like, here we go. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and he stays quiet through it.
Yeah.
And stays out of her way,
Yeah.
right?
And I think talk about processing. I think most of the processes,
Yeah.
at like
true.
every episode, every whatever, it's like, okay, cool. Let's anybody have any feelings? What do we need to talk about? Like, everybody good? Like, do we need to unpack what just happened? And I see so many people feel really anxious about having those conversations with kids. I'm like, they know they just lost their shit.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like we're doing them any favors by not acknowledging what just happened.
Right.
We have this game. I'll make a little plug for this product. We are not sponsored by them, but maybe we should be. And it's from the School of Life, and it's called the Family Game. And it asks a series of questions like, who in the family is like most likely to lose it and have like XYZ of a thing happen? And the kids love this game. Like they love it. They're like,
imitate what so-and-so would say if such and such happened. Yeah, totally.
It's a
really, oh my God, that's fun. That's fun.
Fun resource.
I'm gonna get that because that's fun for dinner time chats to get the kids to kind of open up. We have this card game we bring out that asks just fun questions, but that's a good one. I'm gonna get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bottom line is parenting is hard, and when you add, I love that it's like, duh, yeah, it's freaking hard. But like you add all these different layers in that LGBTQ families have from the get-go, then you add the layer of divorce and blending of families, and then you have neurodiversities, and this is universal all over the world. This is not just every single family can relate to the conversation we just had.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is parenting is fucking hard.
It's fucking hard. I've been saying to it a lot lately. I'm like, I don't know what this thing is that where we decided like it was completely reasonable to have like 2 parents, or more. I'll give a shout out to our like multiple partnered families out there. And like have jobs and run businesses and do creative projects. And like, I mean, it's just
like, what's wrong with us? Really?
I'm like, no, I don't think this really works. I mean, we're making it work, but I don't think it's like deeply working.
Yeah. I'm like you, I want to go drink some tea and process some shit. You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing? Meanwhile, instead, I'm going to go pick up my kids and deal with my 5-year-old having a tantrum the whole way home because he doesn't want to walk or I didn't bring the right freaking snack. Or like his fingers.
Do you ever just turn the music up in the car? That's something Gwen taught me. She was like,
I don't have a car.
I think we'll just right there in the city. Like,
I don't have a car. I'm on public transportation, and then I'm walking.
I don't know that kid. Yeah,
exactly. No, there's so many times I get real close to my kid's face, and I'm like, "Listen to me right now. Listen to me right now. You are not acting this way on this bus. Look around. Look around. Do you hear anybody else screaming on this bus right now? Like."
Eye contact. Are you with me?
Look at me right now. Look at me right now. That's I literally did that this morning. Look at me right now. Look at me. Look at me. This is the snack I brought.
My son will still comment on that. He's like, remember when you used to get really close to my face and say things in that really serious fast voice? I was like, yeah, I do.
Oh, you know what else? I saw this thing on the TikTok, as you do. I learn everything on TikTok. I saw this person, he's supposed to be some like expert in parenting children with ADHD. And he was like, you're don't keep repeating yourself to your kid. They're not going to hear it. You're just going to get yourself mad. He's doing this whole thing. He said, what you do, you need physical contact. You look in your kid's eyes, you put your hands on their shoulders, and you say, please go brush your teeth. And you make sure they look at you, right? So I was like, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. And the next morning, at first I went, Rose, I need you to. And then I went, wait. Okay, wait. I have this new method. I have this new technique. I went over. I put my hands on her shoulders. I looked deep in her eyes. I said, Rose, I need you to brush your teeth. And she looked at me and she said, what is wrong with you? Why did you just put your hands on me? Like, what is that, Mom? What was that? Ew.
Totally. She was like, that's fucking creepy.
And then the rest of the morning I kept doing it. She kept being like, Mom, what? And then it just became like a joke. And now I just do it as a joke and we have a laugh together.
I feel like this is like, I mean, what is it, like landmark education or landmark form or something where they're like, let's make really close eye contact.
She was not having it. And now I just do it kind of as a joke so that we can laugh with each other. Because I know she's still not going to brush her fucking teeth. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to say it 30 times. I'm going to. And it's my job to not lose my patience on the
It's so funny. I will say it's like, you know, I do this work with like leaders and organizations. I talk a lot about like motivation and helping people find meaning and like intrinsically motivated. And when it comes to parenting, sometimes I just saw you pause. When it comes to parenting, sometimes I continue to take the most like command and control approach. I find sometimes where I'm like, if you don't brush your teeth, they're going to rot out of your head and like, you're never going to have teeth and it's going to be horrible for the rest of your life. I'm like constantly find myself like motivating through fear. And I'm like, what am I doing right now? Why am I
but you go to your final resort no matter what. My thing right now, and that's this week, is I'm taking things away. Like if your shoes are not on, by the time I walk out of this room, I am taking away 10 minutes of screen time like I'm just taking shit away now.
Yeah,
I mean, like nothing works. It only works if they want it.
And then you're like, oh, I forgot.
Yeah, you're like, I have a meeting. I need you to be on screens for those.
Guys, I haven't forgotten that I took your screens away, but I have to go into this Zoom.
We're gonna use it for tomorrow.
It's such a problem. It's such a problem. Oh. Anyway, look, parenting is hard. I think you two are doing a top-notch job, and I'm just so happy that I got to chat with you.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure. Yeah.
This has been really fun. And please tell everybody where we can find you. And Liz, tell everybody about your podcast and you know, what the stuff. Like, where can we find y'all?
I have a podcast called First Person Plural, Emotional Intelligence and Beyond. That's one place to find me. And then my business is New Realm Coaching and Consulting. And so I do team building and leadership development, and essentially I'm trying to put humanity back in the workplace, along with all my other lovely colleagues.
We all need that. And Gwen, your book, the name of your book one more time for us.
Immaculate Misconception.
And it comes out in June.
It comes out late May, it turns out.
We're gonna late May.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
and you can find my website is drgwenbass.com, and you can find me on social media too.
I love how she won't own being a doctor. She's like, DR.
Well, no, but I didn't want people to be like spelling out like doctor. Anyway, there are apparently not a lot of people in the world named Gwen Bass. So if you just Google me, you'll find me.
That's amazing. Apparently there is another Jamie Kelton who spells it exactly the same way as me, and she was a beauty queen.
Oh, she's a beauty queen.
Which is not me. So it's really interesting. It's very interesting.
Oh, and she must be all over Google too if she's a beauty queen. Like there must be lots of Jamie images.
Yeah, there are. It's really interesting. She's blonde like myself, but I am not tall like she is, and I don't look like that. Anyway, so beauty queen Jamie Kelton is different than podcaster Jamie Kelton. So just know the difference, friends. But Dr. Own It, Dr. Gwen Bass. I think I should have been calling you Dr. Gwen Bass the entire time.
I would really hate that.
She would hate it.
It's amazing that you get to go by doctor. I would use that. I would use the shit.
My kids will tell you, like, she's not a real doctor. She's like a doctor who knows stuff.
Well, that's like me telling my kids, I'm a professional singer. You know this, right? Like, don't tell me to stop singing. I'm professional. I was trained. Like,
it must seem like it's my job because it is my job.
I got paid to sing for 20 plus years, kids. People paid me for this shit. Yeah. Kids suck, but we love them, and parenting is hard. And thank you so much. This has really, really, really been a pleasure. Love you
Thank
guys.
you.
Don't go anywhere. I'm just gonna stop all my recordings.